was putting on my coat when my phone buzzed. I almost didn't look at it. I figured it was my son-in-law confirming the address, or maybe my daughter reminding me not to be late again the way she always does. Half joking, half serious, the way she has been since she was 16 years old. I grabbed my keys, checked the time just after 5, and then I looked at the screen. It was my accountant, Gordon Hale, a man I've known for 11 years. A man who has never once called me outside of business hours, never texted me anything except the occasional appointment reminder, never used more than 3 sentences when 2 would do. The message said, "Call me before you go anywhere tonight. It's urgent." I stood in my front hallway in Oakville, coat half on, keys in my hand, and I felt something cold settle in my chest. Not panic. Not yet. Just that particular stillness you get when you're 63 years old and you've learned that certain words from certain people mean something has already gone wrong. You're not being warned. You're being told. I called him back. He picked up before the second ring. "Gordon," I said, "what's going on?" There was a pause. Not long. Maybe 2 seconds. But I've known Gordon long enough to know that 2 seconds from him is the equivalent of someone else clearing their throat and staring at the floor. "Walter," he said, "are you sitting down?" I wasn't. I leaned against the wall in my hallway instead. "Just tell me," I said. He told me. I should explain who I am and what my life looks like, because none of what happened makes sense without it. My name is Walter. I'm 63. I'm a retired civil engineer, 31 years with the same firm in Mississauga, then 8 years as a consultant before my knees and my patients both gave out around the same time. My wife Carol passed away 6 years ago. Ovarian cancer. We had 18 months from diagnosis to the end, and I won't say more about that except that she handled it with more grace than I've ever managed anything in my entire life, and that losing her rearranged everything I thought I knew about myself. After she died, I sold the house we'd raised our family in, a 4-bedroom detached in Burlington, and bought a smaller place in Oakville, closer to my daughter, Fiona. That was the logic. She was 31 at the time, married to a man named Bradley, and they had just had their first child, my grandson, a boy named Theo. I wanted to be nearby. I wanted to be useful. I think, if I'm honest, I also wanted to not be alone in a 4-bedroom house where every room had a version of Carol in it. She was the person I was closest to in the world after Carol died. My son, Andrew, lives in Calgary. He calls on Sundays reliably. Good man. But there is a distance between us that has nothing to do with geography. Always has been. Fiona and I were different. She called me on Tuesdays just to talk. She brought Theo over on Saturday morning so I could take him to the park. She remembered that I liked dark roast, not medium, and she'd have a cup ready when I walked in the door. Small things. The kind of small things that, when you're grieving and 60 years old and alone, constitute the entire texture of your life. Her husband Bradley was something else. I want to be careful here because I don't think I'm an unreasonable person. I didn't dislike Bradley because he married my daughter. I didn't dislike him because I was a protective father. I disliked him because, in the 11 years of knowing the man, I had never once seen him take responsibility for anything that didn't go in his favor. He was charming in the way that very selfish people often are. Quick with a compliment, quick with a laugh, just attentive enough that you only noticed the pattern when you laid all the individual moments end to end. When they bought their house in Brampton, I lent them $80,000. This was 2 years after Carol died, and I had the money from the sale of the Burlington house and a life insurance settlement that I hadn't quite figured out what to do with yet. I didn't offer it as a gift. We sat down, the 3 of us, and we agreed on terms. They would pay me back over 10 years. No interest. I didn't want interest from my own daughter. We drew up a simple, written agreement. I have a copy in my filing cabinet. They paid for the first year. Then Theo was born and money got tighter, and they missed a few payments, and I didn't push because Fiona was exhausted and Bradley had just changed jobs, and I wasn't going to be the kind of father who adds to his daughter's stress. Then they missed another year, then another. By the time Gordon called me that evening in October, they had paid back $11,000 of the $80,000 I had lent them, and the rest had simply stopped being a conversation. But that wasn't what Gordon wanted to tell me. What Gordon wanted to tell me was something different entirely, Something I hadn't seen coming, which is embarrassing to admit because when he said it and I played the last 2 years back in my head, it was there the whole time, hiding in plain sight. About 8 months before that phone call, I had agreed to co-sign a line of credit for Fiona and Bradley. The way Bradley explained it, they needed the credit line to cover some cash flow problems with a renovation business he was trying to get off the ground. He had a contractor's license, he said. He had 2 jobs already lined up. He just needed operating capital to bridge the gap until the first payments came in. Fiona was there when he explained it, and she nodded along. And she didn't say anything that contradicted him, and I genuinely thought this was a real plan. The credit line was for $40,000, through their bank, with me as co-signer. I want to say I had reservations. I did, technically. I asked Bradley for the contracts he mentioned, the 2 jobs lined up. He said they weren't finalized in writing yet, but they were solid. He'd email me the details. The email never came. I asked once, he said he'd get to it, and then I let it go because I didn't want to make Fiona feel like I was calling her husband a liar in her own kitchen. I should have pushed harder. I know that now. At the time, I told myself I was being a supportive father. Looking back, I think I was being a coward. What Gordon told me, standing in my hallway with my coat half on, was that the line of credit had been drawn down to 0. All $40,000. Over a period of about 5 months. And the minimum payments had been missed for the last 3 months in a row. The bank had contacted Gordon because he handles my financial records and had flagged him as my accountant of record when the credit application went through. They haven't paid anything since July, Gordon said. And Walter, I ran some numbers. There's no renovation business. I can't find any incorporation, any business registration, any GST number, nothing. I didn't say anything for a moment. I could be wrong, Gordon said. I'm not a private investigator, but I wanted you to know before you did anything. I'm supposed to be at their house in 40 minutes, I said. Another 2-second pause. I know, he said. That's why I called. I sat down on the bench in my hallway. The little wooden one Carol picked out at a market in Elora the summer before she got sick, and I sat there for probably 10 minutes. I want to tell you I was angry. I was, underneath. But the first thing I felt, the thing that sat on top of everything else, was a specific kind of grief. The kind you feel when something you believed in turns out to have been different from what it appeared. Not surprised grief. The worst kind, the kind where part of you knew and chose not to look. I thought about Fiona. I thought about whether she knew, whether she was part of it, or whether she was standing in her kitchen right now making dinner for a husband who had borrowed money from her grieving father and spent it on something he'd never be honest about. I thought about Theo, who was 4 years old and had done nothing wrong and would have no say in whatever happened next. I thought about Carol, which I do whenever anything important happens. I thought about what she would tell me to do. Carol was not a soft woman in the ways people sometimes expect mothers to be. She was precise and fair, and she did not tolerate dishonesty. Not from anyone, not even from herself. I think she would have told me to go to dinner. I think she would have told me not to say a word until I knew more. I think she would have told me to watch. So I finished putting my coat on. I drove to Brampton. And I watched. The dinner was a Sunday roast. Fiona's cooking, not Bradley's, because Bradley didn't cook, which was one of those small facts about a person that reveals something larger if you look at it long enough. She'd made a beef tenderloin, roasted potatoes, green beans. There was a bottle of Malbec open on the counter that Bradley poured from without asking if I wanted any. Theo came running down the hallway when he heard me come in and grabbed my leg and asked if I'd brought him anything, because I usually do. I usually have a little chocolate bar in my coat pocket, and I had, and we did our normal routine. And for a moment, standing in their front hallway watching my grandson unwrap a coffee crisp, I felt the whole thing become unreal. Like maybe Gordon had made an error. Like maybe I'd misunderstood something. Then Bradley handed me a glass of wine and said, "Walter, good timing. We actually wanted to talk to you about something." And the cold feeling was back. I sat down. Fiona was quiet in a way she usually wasn't. She had her hands wrapped around her wine glass, and she was looking at the table more than at me. Which was how I knew, in the specific and particular way you know things about your children, things you've read in their faces since they were small, that she was nervous, or ashamed, or both. Bradley did most of the talking. The renovation business was struggling, he said. They'd had some setbacks, Some clients hadn't paid. Materials costs had gone up. He wanted to discuss. He paused here, and he smiled the particular smile he used when he was asking for something. He wanted to discuss whether I'd be willing to increase the credit line, or alternatively, he said, they'd been thinking about the loan from a few years back, and whether there was any possibility of considering that a gift rather than a debt. I looked at Fiona when he said that last part. She was still looking at the table. I kept my voice very level. I asked Bradley to walk me through the renovation business, the clients, the jobs, the contracts. I asked him to tell me the business names so I could have a look at the registration. I watched his expression move through several things very quickly. Surprise, then recalibration, then the performance of ease that people practice when they're caught mid-lie and are trying to decide how much of it to admit to. I'd have to find the paperwork, he said. Take your time, I said. Fiona put her glass down. She said, Dad, what's going on? I was going to ask you the same thing, I said. And that was the moment. That was the moment the whole dinner came apart. Not loudly. There was no shouting. There never is in my family. Carol didn't raise us that way. But Fiona looked at her husband with an expression I hadn't seen before, and Bradley looked at the window, and the room went quiet in a way that answered several questions I hadn't finished asking. After Bradley took Theo upstairs, Fiona and I sat at the kitchen table for a long time. She didn't know about the line of credit being drawn down to zero. That became clear relatively quickly. She knew it had been used, she said. Bradley had told her they were covering materials costs. But she hadn't known the payments had stopped. She hadn't known the account was empty. And she hadn't known the account was empty. And she hadn't known that Gordon had flagged it. What she did know, and what came out slowly, in pieces, the way things come out when someone is simultaneously trying to be honest and trying to protect someone they love, was that the renovation business had never really taken off the way Bradley described it to me. There were jobs, a few of them, but there was also money that had gone to other things. A truck he'd bought and registered under a cousin's name. A trip to Vegas in the spring that she thought was a work conference. Credit cards she didn't know existed until she found a statement in the recycling 3 weeks ago. I listened to all of it. I didn't tell her I was relieved that she didn't know. I didn't tell her that the worst version of the night I'd imagined on the drive over was the one where she was sitting across from me and lying to my face too. I just listened, and I passed her a tissue when she needed one. And I thought about what I was going to do. Here's what I did. I had already, before dinner, sent Gordon an email asking him to document everything he'd found. The missed payments, the drawdown dates, the lack of any registered business. I had already, on the drive over, made a call to a family lawyer I'd dealt with once before, a woman named Sandra Cross, who had handled a legal matter for Andrew a few years back. I'd left a voicemail. She called me back the next morning. The co-signing agreement, Sandra told me, was enforceable. The original loan agreement from the Burlington house money was also a legal document, and the written terms meant it wasn't a gift regardless of what Bradley wanted to characterize it as. The missed credit payments were a liability issue that would require careful handling, but they were handleable. I won't walk through every step of what followed because some of it is still ongoing, and some of it involves Fiona in ways that are hers to decide how to talk about. What I will tell you is that I did not write off the money. I did not pretend it hadn't happened to keep the peace at Christmas dinner. I did not let my love for my daughter be used as a reason to accept something that was, by any reasonable standard, dishonest. Bradley moved out of the Brampton house in December. That was his decision, once it became clear that the financial picture was going to be examined by people who weren't going to accept the paperwork is somewhere as an answer. The separation is Fiona's process, not mine, and I have tried very hard to be a support without being a presence that makes it about me. What is mine to say is this. Fiona called me on a Tuesday, about 3 months later. Our usual Tuesday call, the first one that had felt like our usual Tuesday call in a long time. She asked how I was. I asked about Theo. She said she'd found a good family therapist, and that she was working through it, and that she wanted me to know she was sorry for how long it had taken her to see clearly. I told her she had nothing to apologize to me for. I told her that being slow to see the truth about someone you love isn't a flaw, it's what love does to your vision, and it corrects itself when it has to, the way most things do. She said, "You sound like Mom." I didn't say anything for a second. "I'll take that," I said. "Thea still comes on Saturday mornings." He still asks if I have chocolate in my coat pocket, and I still do, and we still go to the park. The same park, the one with the big climbing structure near the lake, where he likes to stand at the top and shout things down to me, and I stand at the bottom and look up at him, and I think about all the things you hold on to and all the things you have to let go of, and the difference, which I am still learning, which I think you learn right up until the end, between the two. I still think about that bench in my hallway sometimes, the wooden one Carol picked out at a market in Elora. I sat on it for 10 minutes after Gordon's call, and I didn't move. And in those 10 minutes, I had to decide what kind of man I was going to be. Not in some dramatic movie poster sense, but in the quiet, practical sense that actually matters. Was I going to pretend I hadn't heard what I heard? Was I going to walk into that dinner and smile and let it go because letting it go felt like love? I've learned at 63 that letting dishonesty go is not love. It looks like love from the outside. It feels like love in the moment. But it isn't. It's fear dressed up in kindness. And fear, when you keep feeding it, grows into something that damages everyone it touches, including the people you were trying to protect. What Bradley did had a logic to it, not a moral logic, but a practical one. He had watched, over years, what happened when he didn't follow through. He watched the loan payments stop and nothing happened. He watched the missing contracts go unquestioned and nothing happened. Every time the consequence didn't arrive, the behavior got a little bolder. That's not evil. It's just how people work when there's no friction. When I stopped providing friction because I was afraid of upsetting Fiona, I wasn't protecting her. I was removing the only thing that might have slowed things down before they got as far as they did. That's the part I sit with. Not what Bradley did, that's his accounting to do, not mine. My part was the years of looking away because looking clearly felt like conflict. Gordon called me because he paid attention, because he kept clean records and asked real questions and didn't let the paperwork slide. I've thought about that a lot, about how much of a decent life comes down to simply being willing to look at things clearly, even when it's uncomfortable, not to be harsh, not to be suspicious of everyone around you, just to stay honest with yourself about what you're actually seeing. Fiona did something hard. She looked clearly at a person she loved and she let what she saw be true even when it hurt. That takes something most people underestimate, a kind of quiet toughness that isn't about being tough at all, really. It's about respecting yourself enough to not live inside a version of your life that isn't real. I don't know everything about how the next few years will go for her. She has Theo, and she has a therapist she trusts, and she has our Tuesday calls, and she has, I hope, the knowledge that her father will tell her the truth when she needs it. That's what I can give her now, not money. That chapter has its own resolution working through the proper channels. Just honesty, consistency, showing up on Saturday mornings with a coffee crisp in my coat pocket and standing at the bottom of the climbing structure while Theo shouts things down at me. Carol used to say that people show you who they are slowly and then all at once. She was right. She usually was. What I'd add now from the other side of all of this is that we also show ourselves who we are, slowly and then all at once, in how we respond to what we're shown. I chose to respond clearly this time. It cost something. It was still the right thing to do.